Hello, everyone. When you first open session, it's called multi-line comment. So you use comments to leave explanation or some piece of information about your code for other developers and even for yourself. In the playground, you see some initial codes. This first, to create a multi-line comment, you start by using the forward slash, the double star, and then you end it by another star and then a backslash. So this part is not actually part. The main thing is this the backslash and then two stars and then end it with another star and then a backslash. So this is how you write a multi-line comment. The multi-line in a sense that it will span multiple lines, and we have another one for just a single line comment. So you use double backslash to write it and write some message like main function. So one thing about this is that when you run this code, the comment will not be executed by the compiler. They are ignored by the compiler. They don't form part of your code results. It's just for information purposes. And this is a function called main function. This keyword fun tells the compiler that you want to create a function. The name of the function is main, and then we have this print ln, which is a call to a function, and then you pass in this text. So when you run it, this function, what it does is that it prints the message you pass to it onto the console. Let's update it to ensure that this code is okay. So I just changed it, hello Kotlin. So if you click here to run your code, you see that this text here will be updated. Okay, so you see hello Kotlin. If you are able to program up to this level and then change the text to Kotlin, congratulations, you are now a Kotlin developer. Let's look at the basic structure of a Kotlin program. There are three main things I will talk about. The first is package. So when you are creating a Kotlin program, usually we declare a package, and then we also write function, and then we write variables. So packages are used to organize your code. For example, if you want to write package, you come to the first line of your code and then write package, and then you can specify a package. So it's just like grouping of your code. So you type something like this. Usually we use like com, and then maybe my name, Maoli dot, and then the name of the project. So hello, yeah, let me say hello world. Yeah, so this is a package, and then you have a function here, and then the next thing you see is a variable. So I'm creating a variable for creating, and then I'll copy this text and then assign it to the variable. I'll assign it to the variable and call the variable here instead of calling passing the string. Okay. So when I run it, I'll see the same output. I've created a variable and call the name of the variable is greeting, and I copy the message and I assign to the variable, and I'm passing the variable to the print function. So whenever you run the program, the print function will call this variable, and the variable will pass the actual value, which is hello string, to it. It needs to be printed on the console. So if you run it, you won't see any difference. You see, so it is done, and as you can see, there's no visible difference. So you have to know, especially when we begin with the Android development, you see a lot of these packages. They are very important for grouping your project, your application code. So this is how to define or declare a package, and this is a function. And we also created a variable. As you can see I'm using the single line comments for adding a simple message to my code. Let's dive deep and look at variables in detail. First off, What exactly is variable? In programming, a variable is like a label you give to a piece of information. So if you see this text, I represented it with this greeting. So wherever I'll call greetings, hello world will be injected into that place. So you can store a value and then later refer to it throughout your program. You can create a variable called name and then store a person's name, or a variable called age and store a person's age over there. This makes it easier to work with that information rather than having to refer to the exact value every time. Another example is if you are writing a program that calculates the total cost of items in a shopping cart, you might need to store the prices of these items. Variables help you to track some of these values and perform calculations on it. So variables hold different type of values. So it is not just text. You can create variables for numbers as well, and then other complex structures. Okay, so if you want to define a variable, you need to think about the kind of data you'll be holding. So we'll look at data types. Pretty soon. Let's look at data types. Data types helps you to specify the kind of data you want to store in a variable. Let's say you create a variable called age. Let's say user age. So age, for age, we know that it is a number. So in Kotlin, how do you specify that you are coming to store a number? We have different type of data type that you can use. A simple example is int, and then it's assigned an age of say 24. We are assigned an age of 24. So now wherever I call this variable user age, this 24 will be injected into that place. Kotlin has a lot of data types, but we'll focus on the common ones. If you want to store numbers, their data types are available to you is int. The first one, this is for integers. For holding negative or positive whole numbers, you can use int. And then another type is double. So the double is for holding fractions like numbers that have decimal points in them. You use double to store them. So fraction or decimal numbers. So if you have like 1.3 and all those stuff, you can store those numbers over here. Typical example is amount, like transaction amount. You usually store them because you have like 10 CDs or 10 CD 50 pesos, 10 CD 80 pesos, those kind of decimal point numbers. You use the double to store them. So when it comes to text, you can use a data type like string. This is for more than one characters. So you use this type to store more than one character. Another one called so this is Boolean. We call it Boolean. This is for two states. Let's say you want something to either be true or false. How do you represent those states? We use a type called Boolean. This is for true or false. So if you want to represent true or false states, we use this type called Boolean. So these are the common ones we'll be dealing with. Numbers, you can use an int, double, or float. And then in text, you can use string. And then Boolean for true or false state, you can use a type called Boolean. So these types are very important because Kotlin is a statically typed language. A statically typed language means that anytime you want to create a variable, you have to specifically specify the type of data you are coming to store in a variable. This is because the language wants to hold you accountable. You can't trick it. If you say you want to store a number and later you try to store a text over there, it will throw an error. So let's see how we can create variable. In Kotlin, we have two ways to create a variable. To create a variable, the syntax, the first approach is using val to create a variable. So this is used to create a read-only variable. When you use this keyword var to create a variable, when you create this variable, you assign a value to it and you can't update that value. You can only assign to it once. The other one is for creating variables that you can change. So we use var. This is var for mutable variables. So if you want to create a variable that you assign a value to, but later you still want to update it. For example, your age. We have an age. Your age keeps updating every year. So you can create a variable and store your age, and tomorrow you want to update it. But let's say the constant pi, it doesn't change. So if you want to store such a value, you store it using the val, val. So let's look at an example. Let's say a variable var is called pi. And then this is how you specify the data type. So this is a double. And then the value, which is 3.1415. Okay, so this is how to create a variable. If you want to create a variable, you use one of these keywords, either val or var, and then the name of the variable. So this is the name of our variable, pi. It's a constant. And then you bring a column. And after the column, you specify the data type. So you pick it from here. Is it an integer? Is it a decimal number? Is it a text? Then you use one of it. Or you are representing the two states, either true or false. Then you specify the data type here. Then you assign the value to the variable by using the equal to sign to create a text type data. For example, your name and all those things. You save it in. You create a variable or username. You bring column, and then you specify the data type of the variable, and then the equal to sign, and then you create. So these are ways of creating variables using val. That's val. You can change this variable. So let's try this. Let's try changing the variable name, username, to something else. So if you want to update this value to a different value, this time around, you don't need to specify the keyword val. You just need to use the same name in order to update it. So I'm copying and pasting here, and then I'm assigning it a new variable of John Doe. And you can see the ID has underlined it as red. Let's find out why. So if you want to know why the red squiggle line, you can just hover over it, and then it will tell you. The ID is telling you that val, that's val, cannot be reassigned. So that's one interesting thing about using the IDE or the playground. Although we got this warning, let's go ahead and run it. It will throw an error on the results session. See, so we get an error call saying val cannot be reassigned. We can't reassign it. So I'll comment it out. So one thing you can use the commenting for is to disable some section of your code. I just put the single line code here to disable this part. So now you can see the error is gone, and then when I run it, my program will run successfully. You can see how to create variables using the var. So to create a variable using the var, let's create a variable called age, user age. I think I have that variable. I'll be getting error if I redeclare such a variable, user age. And the age is an integer because it's a whole number. So I specify the type int and then set it to 0. Maybe I was just born. Like I said, I already created this variable, so I'll get an error. Let me comment this one out. So I created this variable called var user age, which is of type int, and then I assign it 0. I was just born yesterday. So let's update it. I'm now 1 year. So you can just call username and then as the equal to sign, and then you give it a different value of 1 year. And then as you can see, the ID has no complaint. And I can print to the print link. So let me my age is. So when I run it, I'll see the message on the screen. My age is, and then my new age. Okay, as you can see here, my age is 1. Okay, so I've created it. I've reassigned different values to it. I've updated it because I'm using VAR. If I change it to VAR, I'll get an error instantly over here, and I can't even run the code. So those are the 2 ways of creating variable in Kotlin. Here on, you saw that I created some variable, this hello world variable. So I created it, but you can see that I've not specified the data type. Why is that? We have a feature in Kotlin called type inference. When you create a variable and you assign a value to it immediately, Kotlin is able to analyze the value and determine the data type. I can come here and just create a variable without assigning a data type to it. So I can remove this and the IDE won't complain as we run it. It was working perfectly. So you can create a variable without the data type, but it is not always the case. So it is safe to keep specifying the type, but as you go and you know more, then you can leave it out. And let's talk about some best practices when you are trying to create a variable. First off, when you are creating a variable, you can start a variable name with a number. You can start a variable name with a number. For example, you can create a variable called, say, 8b. Z, like, you can create a variable like that. You can create a variable name that starts with a number. So you'll be getting a warning, saying unexpected token, blah 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 blah. But the main thing is that you can create a variable name with a number. So let me just remove the number and see the error will be gone. Variable can contain letters, digits, and underscore. Okay. So you can, when you create a variable, it can contain numbers. So for example, the one we created, the 8 bits, it can be bits 8. You can have a variable like that. You can have a variable like that. But as in the beginning, it cannot be a number. So the variable can contain, so the number can be in the middle, it can be anywhere or something. It is good to go. But you can start the variable name with a number. That's one thing you have to make sure you don't use the reserved words. These are reserved words like the VAR, VAL, and then the FUN, and then the packages. These are reserved words. You can't use them in naming your variables because Kotlin cannot differentiate. And when you are creating your variable, make sure you use descriptive names. Don't create variable name like X. Create your variable and you name it like variable X, variable, I don't know. You create your variable and name it X or X and Y, right? They go together. So we don't create a variable using X and Y. If in 10 years time another developer comes to work on your project, how will he know this is what X and Y means? So you use descriptive words. If it's username, if it's Y coordinate or something, dependent variable, independent variable, you can use that instead of saying X and Y. You use descriptive terms like username. You know that okay, this variable is a label for username. This is a label for user age. Another thing you have to know is that we have a convention when you're naming variables in Kotlin. Make sure you read about them. For example, we use camel cases for naming variables. So this is an example of camel case. you start your first word has to be lowercase, and then the subsequent word should start with uppercase. So if you are naming a variable, say product ID, you make it product ID. Okay, so this is a product ID. You begin with a small letter. The first word should start with a small letter, and then the second word should start with a capital letter. So these are naming conventions. These are standards that when you are practicing, I think it applies to most of the other programming languages. So when you are following it, it makes it easy for other people to understand your code and then maintain it. And then avoid single letter variables. For example, the X and Y or A, I. Make sure you avoid those things. More often, when you are creating variable, make sure you use VAL, the var over the VAR, unless you are certain that you are about to change. You will change the variable later in the future. It helps you avoid error. Make sure you assign initial values to variables.